My fiancé asked for a break, saying, "I just want to see if there's still something there with Dylan before we get married." I calmly agreed, but what I did next destroyed her completely. Let me explain how I got here. I'm a 27-year-old project manager for a tech company in Seattle, making $125,000 annually. Tessa, my now ex-fiancée, is 26 and works as a freelance graphic designer, pulling in around $45,000 per year when she's consistent with clients. We'd been together for 4 years, and I thought we had built something solid. The house we were living in, that's entirely in my name. I purchased it 3 years ago for $485,000, put down $97,000 from my savings, and have been paying the $20,200 monthly mortgage ever since. Tessa contributed $400 monthly toward groceries and utilities, but legally speaking, she had zero claim to the property. She loved acting like it was our home, constantly redecorating and making plans for renovations, but I'm the one who qualified for the loan and whose name is on the deed. When Tessa dropped her bombshell about needing to explore things with Dylan, her college ex who cheated on her repeatedly, something clicked in my brain. Years of working in project management had taught me that when facing a crisis, you need data, documentation, and a strategic response plan. You don't react emotionally. You analyze the situation and implement solutions. I spent that entire night after she left for her mother's house creating what I called my strategic response documentation system. I opened Excel spreadsheets tracking our shared expenses, joint accounts, and financial obligations. We had $12,400 in a joint savings account at Chase Bank that we'd been building for wedding expenses. I documented every deposit, every contribution, and calculated exactly what percentage came from each of our incomes. The wedding planning had already cost us $8,200 in deposits, $3,500 for the venue, $2,200 for catering, $1,800 for photography, and $700 for flowers. All of these contracts were in both our names, but I had paid 73% of the total costs based on our income difference. I photographed every receipt, every contract, and every email exchange with vendors. But here's where my strategic thinking really kicked in. I realized that Tessa's request wasn't just about Dylan. It was about keeping me as a financial safety net while she explored her options. She wanted all the security of our relationship, our shared home, and our joint finances, while having the freedom to date someone else. That's when I decided she was about to learn a very expensive lesson about consequences. First, I called my attorney, Marcus Rivera, who charges $350 per hour but had helped me with the house purchase. "Marcus, I need to understand my rights here. My fiancé wants a break to date her ex, but we're financially entangled." He scheduled an emergency consultation for Monday morning. That weekend, I documented everything. I created a timeline of Tessa's increasingly distant behavior over the past 3 months. I screenshotted her social media interactions, particularly the ones with Dylan that had been increasing in frequency. I discovered she'd been messaging him on Instagram since February, 2 months before she asked for the break. I documented 47 instances of communication between them, including late-night conversations that happened while she was lying next to me in bed. Monday morning, Marcus laid out my options. "The house is entirely yours to do with as you please. The joint accounts are fair game. You can withdraw your contributions at any time. The wedding contracts are more complicated, but since you paid the majority of deposits, you'll take the biggest financial hit if you cancel. However, proceeding with cancellations now, before more money is invested, limits your exposure." I paid Marcus $1,400 for a comprehensive strategy session and document review. He helped me create a withdrawal plan that protected my assets while remaining completely legal. We drafted letters to vendors, prepared account closure documentation, and established a timeline for property decisions. Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., I started executing the plan. First stop, Chase Bank. I withdrew $9,048 from our joint savings, exactly 73% of the total balance based on our income contributions and documented deposits. I left Tessa's 27% share, totaling $3,350, and opened a new individual account at a different bank. The banker asked if everything was okay, and I simply said, "I'm protecting my assets during a relationship transition. Next, I contacted our wedding vendors. The venue manager was surprisingly understanding when I explained the situation. "Mr. Johnson, given the circumstances, we can offer you a 40% refund of your deposit if you cancel within 48 hours. After that, our contract terms apply fully." I accepted immediately, recovering $1,400 of the $3,500 deposit. The photographer was less accommodating, but offered a 25% refund, giving me back $450. The caterer and florist had stricter policies, meaning I lost $2,900 in deposits, but I calculated this was still cheaper than proceeding with a wedding to someone who considered me a backup option. By Wednesday, I had canceled 90% of our wedding arrangements and recovered $1,150 of the $200 in deposits. Total financial damage was $6,350. Expensive, but far less than a wedding would have cost, and infinitely less than a divorce later. Then I made the move that really demonstrated Tessa's lack of understanding about our financial arrangement. I contacted Rebecca Martinez, the top realtor in our neighborhood, who'd sold 3 houses on our street in the past year. "Rebecca, I need to understand the current market value of my property and explore listing options." She came by Thursday for a comparative market analysis. "Mr. Johnson, based on recent sales and your property's improvements, I'd recommend listing at $589,000. The market is incredibly hot right now. We're seeing most properties sell within 2 weeks at or above asking price." That evening, I signed the listing agreement. The house would go on the market Monday morning, with professional photography scheduled for Friday. On Friday, while Tessa was presumably exploring her feelings with Dylan, professional photographers were documenting every room of what she'd considered our home. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was creating new memories with her ex while I was creating marketing materials to sell the foundation of our life together. That's when Tessa's first panicked call came. Her mother had apparently mentioned seeing a moving truck at our house, which confused her since I wasn't scheduled to move anything. What she had seen was the staging company bringing in furniture to make rooms look more spacious for listing photos. "Liam, what's going on? Mom said there were people at the house with furniture and cameras." Her voice had a concerned edge I hadn't heard before. "Just some home improvement projects," I replied calmly. "How are things going with your break?" The silence that followed was telling. Monday morning, the listing went live. By Tuesday afternoon, we had 4 showing requests. By Friday, we had 2 offers, one at asking price, another at $595,000. I accepted the higher offer, pending inspection and financing approval. The closing was scheduled for exactly 45 days later. That weekend, Tessa's second wave of panic calls began. Someone had told her they saw our house on Zillow. "Liam, please tell me you didn't actually list the house. We agreed this was just a break to figure things out." "Tessa, you asked for space to explore your options. I'm exploring mine. Selling the house and starting fresh seems like the best option for me right now." I kept my voice matter of fact, as if I were discussing a work project, rather than dismantling our life together. "But where will I live when I'm done figuring this out? That's our home." The possessive language was interesting, considering her name appeared nowhere on any ownership documents. "That house is my financial responsibility and my decision to make. You chose to explore other relationships. I chose to explore other living situations. Fair is fair." The next phase of my strategy involved creating professional distance. I work in tech, and network effects matter tremendously. Tessa's freelance design business depended heavily on referrals from people in my professional circle. I didn't badmouth her or sabotage her reputation. I simply stopped actively promoting her services and recommending her for projects. When colleagues asked about wedding plans, I gave a simple, factual response. Tessa decided she needed to explore a relationship with her ex-boyfriend before committing to marriage. I respected her choice and made my own decisions accordingly. No drama, no emotional manipulation, just facts. The response was immediate and telling. Sarah Chen, a product manager at a startup downtown who'd sent several clients to Tessa, called me directly. "Liam, I heard about the situation. I have to ask, is Tessa in a stable place professionally? I was about to recommend her for a major rebranding project, but if there's personal chaos affecting her work." I remained diplomatic. "Sarah, I can only speak to my own experience. You'll have to make your own assessment about her current professional reliability. Within a week, Sarah hired a different designer. So did 3 other contacts who'd been considering Tessa for projects. This wasn't revenge, it was natural consequences. When you make choices that suggest commitment issues, people in professional networks naturally question your reliability for long-term projects. Meanwhile, my strategic financial planning was paying dividends. With the house sale proceeding smoothly, I started exploring relocation opportunities. My company had been discussing opening a West Coast satellite office, and I volunteered to lead the expansion. The timing was perfect. I could liquidate my Seattle assets and start fresh in San Francisco with a promotion and 15% salary increase. 2 weeks after listing the house, Dylan reached out to me directly through LinkedIn. His message was almost comedic. "Hey man, I hope there's no hard feelings about the Tessa situation. She reached out to me first, and I thought you should know this wasn't my idea. Also, just wanted to say, I think you're handling this really maturely." I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Marcus with a note. FYI, evidence that this was premeditated on her part, not a spontaneous decision. He replied, "Perfect documentation. This supports your position that her actions were calculated rather than impulsive emotional confusion." The house inspection went smoothly, and financing was approved ahead of schedule. We moved the closing date up by a week. I was liquidating my largest asset and relocating to another state, while Tessa was still exploring her feelings. That's when the real panic set in for her. She showed up at my office unannounced, clearly having realized the magnitude of what was happening. Security called up to confirm I wanted to see her. Apparently, she'd been crying in the lobby for 20 minutes. When she came up to my floor, her appearance shocked me. The confident, put-together woman I'd lived with for 3 years looked exhausted and desperate. "Liam, please, we need to talk. I made a mistake. Dylan isn't. Things aren't working out the way I thought they would." I booked a conference room for privacy. Her story came out in a rush. Dylan had been exactly as unreliable and commitment-phobic as when they dated in college. He'd been seeing other people simultaneously, had made no effort to build anything serious with her, and had basically treated her as a convenient hookup while she'd blown up her entire life for him. "I realize now that I had something amazing with you, and I threw it away because I was scared of commitment. I thought the grass might be greener, but I was wrong. Can we please try to fix this?" I listened without interrupting, then pulled out my phone and showed her a document. "Tessa, this is the closing statement for the house sale. It happens next Friday. I've accepted a position in San Francisco starting next month. I've already signed the lease on a new apartment there." Her face went white. "You're moving? But what about us? What about working things out?" "There is no us to work out. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't worth your full commitment before exploring other options. I made mine when I decided I deserved better than being someone's safety net." She started crying, pleading that she'd been confused, scared, that she'd learned her lesson and would never take me for granted again. But here's what she didn't understand. This wasn't about forgiveness or second chances. This was about fundamental compatibility and respect. "Tessa, let me ask you something. When you were messaging Dylan for months before asking for a break, did you think about how that would affect me? When you were planning to keep our shared home and joint finances as backup while you explored other relationships, did you consider that might be unfair?" She couldn't answer because the honest response would have been no. She'd been thinking entirely about her own desires and had treated me as a resource to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. The conversation ended with her asking if there was anything she could do to change my mind. I told her the only thing that might have made a difference would have been making better choices 6 months ago when she first started reconnecting with Dylan. House closing went perfectly. After all expenses, I netted $127,000 in equity. Not bad for 3 years of ownership in a rising market. The buyers were a young couple thrilled to get their first home, and I genuinely felt good about passing along a property I'd maintained well. My last week in Seattle was busy with relocation logistics, but I took time to ensure loose ends were properly tied up. I forwarded Marcus a comprehensive file of all documentation related to the relationship dissolution, including financial records, communication logs, and timeline documentation. For future reference, I noted, in case any issues arise after I relocate, the moving company packed my belongings efficiently. It was interesting to see 4 years of shared life reduced to clearly defined ownership. Everything I'd brought into the relationship, everything I'd purchased individually, everything registered in my name, it all fit neatly into the moving truck. Tessa's contributions to our shared life had been minimal in terms of lasting assets. My San Francisco apartment has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The rent is $3,800 monthly, significantly more than my Seattle mortgage, but easily manageable with my salary increase and no longer supporting another person's inconsistent income. 3 months after my move to San Francisco, I received an unexpected email from Dylan. Apparently, Tessa had become increasingly unstable after realizing the full scope of what she'd lost. She'd been constantly comparing their relationship to what she'd had with me, had been stalking my social media profiles, and had been pressuring him for commitment he wasn't prepared to give. She kept saying she'd made the biggest mistake of her life and asking if I thought you'd ever take her back, Dylan wrote. I told her she needed to move on, and she accused me of not being serious about our relationship. It got pretty toxic, so I ended things with her last week. So Tessa had lost both relationships and was apparently living with her parents while trying to rebuild her client base. According to mutual friends who still kept in touch with me, she'd been struggling financially without the stability of our shared household and had been forced to take on smaller projects at lower rates. Meanwhile, I'd been thriving in San Francisco. The tech scene was incredible, my new role was challenging and rewarding, and I'd started dating someone new. A brilliant software architect named Claire, who appreciated directness and had never once expressed interest in exploring other options. 6 months after my move, Tessa managed to send a long email through our mutual friend Jake, since I'd blocked her direct communications on all platforms. She'd apparently started therapy, had gained perspective on her actions, and wanted to apologize for how she'd handled everything. The email acknowledged that she'd been selfish, short-sighted, and had taken me for granted. But here's the thing about consequences. They're educational, not reversible. Her apology didn't change the fact that she'd shown me exactly how she operated under pressure, exactly how she valued commitment, and exactly how she treated people who invested in her. I didn't respond to the apology email, but I did forward it to Marcus with a note. Final documentation for the file. Subject acknowledges responsibility for relationship dissolution and confirms my decision-making was appropriate. The most satisfying development came 8 months after my relocation. Remember Sarah Chen, the product manager who'd been considering Tessa for a major rebranding project? She ended up hiring me to consult on the technical aspects of their new platform. The project was worth $15,000 to me personally, exactly what I'd lost in wedding deposits and relationship dissolution costs. During our project kickoff meeting, Sarah mentioned, I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Working with you has been incredibly professional and reliable. I heard through the network that your ex has been struggling with consistency and meeting deadlines. Bullet dodged on multiple fronts, it seems. I kept my response diplomatic, but internally I felt vindicated. Strategic thinking and professional behavior had protected not just my finances and emotional well-being, but it actually enhanced my professional reputation. 1 year after the move, I ran into Jake at a tech conference in San Francisco. He filled me in on Tessa's current situation. She'd moved back in with her parents permanently after struggling to maintain her freelance business. The loss of referrals from my professional network had hit her harder than expected, and she'd been forced to take a part-time job at a local marketing agency making $32,000 annually, significantly less than her previous freelance income. She asks about you sometimes, Jake mentioned. Always wondering if you're happy, if you ever think about her. I think she's finally realized what she threw away. I nodded politely, but felt nothing. That chapter of my life was completely closed. 2 years after leaving Seattle, I proposed to Claire during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. We'd been living together for 8 months in a beautiful house we purchased together in Marin County. This time, with both our names on the deed and a relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial convenience. Claire had never once suggested she needed to explore other options to be sure about me. She'd never treated me as a backup plan while pursuing someone else. She understood that real love means choosing your partner every day, not keeping them on hold while you test other possibilities. Our wedding was small but perfect, exactly what Tessa and I had originally planned, but with someone who actually wanted to be there. The total cost was $18,000, which we split proportionally based on our incomes. No drama, no second guessing, no backup plans. I still maintain most of the documentation from the Tessa situation, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of the value of strategic thinking when facing personal crises. When someone shows you they consider you an option rather than a priority, believe them immediately and respond accordingly. The total financial impact analysis, documented in spreadsheets I still reference, tells the story clearly. Strategic response and immediate action saved me approximately $43,000 compared to proceeding with the wedding, and another $31,000 in potential divorce costs if the marriage had failed later. The $6,350 in immediate losses was excellent tuition for learning exactly what kind of partner I never wanted again. 3 years later, Jake mentioned that Tessa had started dating someone new, a guy she met at her marketing agency job. "She seems different," he said. "More cautious, less entitled. I think losing you really changed her perspective on relationships." I was genuinely happy to hear she'd found someone and learned from our experience. But it didn't change anything about my own choices. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are actually the most valuable investments you can make in your future happiness and financial security. Today, Claire and I are expecting our first child. We've built something real together, a partnership based on trust, commitment, and mutual respect. Neither of us has ever needed to explore other options because we chose each other completely from the beginning. When people ask me about handling relationship crises, I always give the same advice. Document everything, consult professionals, protect your assets, and never accept being someone's backup plan. Strategic thinking beats emotional reactions every single time. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you exactly who they are before you make permanent commitments. Tessa did me the biggest favor of my life by revealing her true character before we got married. I just wish it hadn't taken her so long to be honest about it.